I was dedicated to being the best mother I could be, just out of that love. I just wanted everything about him to thrive. And that was private schools and church on Wednesday nights so that he'd have youth group with friends and like-minded friends.
All the things you think you're going to do to protect your kid, too.
Yeah, and that strong will is what you hit on, really made me feel like I wouldn't have to worry about peer pressure with him. He's not going to do anything he doesn't want to do. And I had so many conversations with him growing up. I believe they saw my child, a freshman in high school, coming from a Christian school to public, as being very vulnerable, small school kid, wasn't really used to all the crowd and probably a lot of the pressures that come with big schools like Dana Hills. It was, in a social situation where he tried something that someone gave to him. And I'm told he took a quarter of it. And he just got the side with the chocolate chip cookie effect that we hear about with fentanyl. You never know what side of the pill. Only 2 salt grains can kill you. So he got the side that had a lot of it. I'm not sure whether the rest of the pill did, but he definitely got a lethal side.
When I attended the White House Office of National Drug Control Policy Summit in May, I had the chance to meet many parents who, like me, have turned the worst moment of their lives into a mission. One of those parents was today's guest, Ann Fundner. Ann lost her 15-year-old son, Weston, to fentanyl poisoning in 2022. Weston was a freshman in high school, a kid who, by all accounts, was loved, was guided, and was given every advantage his family could offer. And yet, in one moment of peer pressure, he took a pill that wasn't what he was told that it was. It contained fentanyl, and he never woke up. Since that February morning, Ann has refused to let Weston's death be just a statistic. She has spoken on some of the biggest stages in the country, testified before Congress, and fought for legislation in his name. We're here to talk about a mother's love, a son's life, and what it means to carry grief forward with purpose. Ann, welcome to Grieving Out Loud.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I know right away we connected when we were in Washington, D.C. We've both experienced something very similar, the loss of a child to fentanyl, and we've both been advocates on local and national stages. So I do feel like we have so much in common.
We do. And unfortunately, there's too many of us angel parents that have this much in common.
And unfortunately, it still continues to happen because it's such an insidious, complicated issue. The drug supply, the drug trade, all of it, there's not just one easy answer to end it, but there are certainly some very obvious solutions like prevention, law enforcement, and treatment and recovery. So we need all of these things to really protect all of our children moving forward. Let's talk a little bit, though, before we kind of get into what works, what doesn't work, what you think needs to be done. Let's talk about Weston, because I really want to learn more about him.
Well, Weston was an incredible child. He was the love of my life. He taught me what love meant. I never knew a love as strong as that, or that it even existed, until I held him in my arms. And I was dedicated to being the best mother I could be, just out of that love. I just wanted everything about him to thrive. And that was private schools and church on Wednesday nights so that he'd have youth group with friends and like-minded friends. And then into Christian school, sports, football. I mean, he played every sport: baseball, football, basketball, hockey. And he loved surfing, but he ended up, focusing mostly on football and hockey, and surfing was his sport with his friends. He had a ton of friends. He loved to e-bike around. He was a very, very, very typical kid. He was curious. So, always kind of like that. I'm not going to say he was like this perfectly listening kid. He listened very well. He had a good grade point average, 3.5. And he worked hard for that, because he sometimes struggled, but he worked very hard for that. He had tutors. But, if I said, don't touch that, it's hot, he was prone to, want to touch things. So
Yeah. Yeah. So he had a strong will. That's what it sounds like to me. And I would say so much of what you're saying, and I want you to continue,
Yeah.
sounds like my daughter as well. A strong-willed, talented, athletic,
Mhm. Yep, absolutely.
Christian
Yeah.
school, all the things you think you're gonna do to protect your kid too.
Yeah, and that strong will is what you hit on, really made me feel like I wouldn't have to worry about peer pressure with him. He's not gonna do anything he doesn't wanna do, and I had so many conversations with him growing up. I was part of, an auxiliary board for Not My Kid in Arizona when we lived there, which was education for, drug,
Oh,
education. So, that was when he was 5 years old. I was an advocate for always making sure you talk to your kids about drugs. I was always pointing out things that, were relevant with, never trying drugs. If you saw someone on the news, this is why you never try drugs. If you see a homeless
right.
person talking to themselves, this is why you never try drugs. I was always, and in California, there's a lot of homeless people, and there's a lot of those drug rehabilitation, overnight places. And I use those as lessons constantly. Never, ever did I think he'd try something, but peer pressure, which I didn't think he would be susceptible to, is what got my son.
And Anne, I wanna touch on a couple things you said there because I thought too, teaching my child about drugs, and I still believe in prevention, and I still believe in teaching kids about drugs. I
Yeah,
just don't think
absolutely.
my daughter got the full message because I was working as a journalist, and so I had her watch a meth special that I reported on and anchored, and we talked about drugs all the time, but she didn't get the full message. And I think kids today, sometimes the influence comes from outside of us, right? It comes from the
Yes.
peers, it comes from what they're seeing on social media, all of these things.
Absolutely. I did a large presentation a couple of days ago with some people from Victoria's Voice and Fentanyl Fathers Angel Army, and just someone actually who was part of drug control policy themselves. We had a big panel, and what I talked about was let your child hear your voice before they hear the voice of the world. How do we talk to our kids about this stuff? Because kids eventually are going to get into a mind of their own. They're going to be influenced by their peers, so it's really important that we talk to them not only about drugs, but about the pressures they're about to face. Because if they don't hear that from you, they're going to hear it from their friends when they're being offered something. So I think that force of, you know, peer influence is extremely, extremely motivating to kids to try things. It's influential, unfortunately. So
Mhm.
my big fight is really talking to your kids about peer pressure. Be that voice that they hear.
Right, and so Weston obviously had a big life, was really involved in a lot of things, and did he go to a party, was hanging out with friends? What happened with this pill that he took?
So he was with some friends, and yeah, they were in a social situation. And I don't have the whole story because it's not really anybody that I really knew well. I've kind of had to piece back a lot of it. It was, in a social situation where he tried something that someone gave to him, and that I'm told he took a quarter of it. And he just got the side with the chocolate chip cookie effect that we hear about with fentanyl. You never know what side of the pill, only 2 salt grains can kill you. So, um, he got the side that had a lot of it. I'm not sure whether the rest of the pill did, but he definitely got a lethal side. Um, and he came home and went to bed and he never woke up. He actually, fell onto his bed. I wish he fell into a door or into his dresser or into something that would have crashed and made noise, but he walked himself up the stairs and then he went into his room, shut the door, and fell onto his bed. Um, and from there, he had, you know, I don't know how long, but we found him in the morning, and it's really awful the way it happened because he thought he was taking a Percocet. Not that he should have ever have done that, but something that he had heard from his doctor with, playing sports and injuries and never let him have one. But he knew what it was. And I think he just thought he could probably score some cool points at a new school. And so he tried it and he couldn't. He couldn't get away with it.
It's also really important to note that he was 15, and kids' brains are not fully developed. Their impulse control isn't fully developed at 15. They can make a impulsive decision even if they normally wouldn't, given the right circumstances. I think, we can't blame Weston for doing that, but we can blame the people that put the fentanyl in the pill and the people that knew about the fentanyl in the pill. So was anyone ever charged in Weston's case? And did anybody else die? from these pills related to Weston's death?
Not at that time, but yes. Person who gave it to him knew because he had lost somebody in his past and hospitalized another one. The person who gave it to that person, no, these people speak your kids' languages, and they train younger kids very well to push these on your child. I believe they saw my child, a freshman in high school, coming from a Christian school to public, as being very vulnerable, small school kid, wasn't really used to all the crowd and probably a lot of the pressures that come with big schools like Dana Hills. And the person above that person, they never tried to find who it was who gave it to him. I did find out who that was later. He's in jail for something different, but short term. And
So law enforcement never pursued anything in your case.
they told me that because the kid he wasn't quite 18, he was almost 18, underage, that they don't prosecute minors, is what they told me, which is crazy. And they should have, because, these kids who don't get prosecuted, if they don't learn, they go on to further, have further arrests for other things, or continue to have arrests for drugs. And seems to be kind of the progression that has happened. So it's unfortunate that they didn't at least give them some sort of punishment to deter them from doing anything bad in the future. But the person who they didn't go after the person above them, that's what really was messed up, in my opinion. Because if they had just tried to go with the guy above him, who was an adult, who was was trafficking it over the border, we know that. How many lives would have been saved? This man gave it to several other people. He was the central dealer. So,
And what happened to him?
nothing. They didn't even go
Nothing.
after him.
Unfortunately, Anne's situation is not unique. I've spoken with many grieving parents on this podcast who say their children's fentanyl deaths were not thoroughly investigated or prosecuted. That includes Terry Almanza, a former Chicago police officer who says she was devastated by how law enforcement handled her daughter, Sydney's death.
I knew that if you were caught selling drugs, you're going to jail. So if you're caught selling drugs and someone dies as a result of it, I would think that that would be just as criminal, if not more. So I had, reached out to law enforcement, and they pretty much said Sydney made a choice, and we were never going to see charges. And they closed the case and classified it as non-criminal prior to her toxicology even coming out. And that's when I thought, unacceptable, no. And I had learned of the drug-induced homicide statute, that it was being enforced in other states and other counties in Illinois, and networked with prosecutors in Will County and McHenry County, and found out that not only were they enforcing it, but it was actually reducing the number of deaths. So really pushed with the Chicago Police Department. They finally reopened the case, but I had to go out there publicly doing rallies, speaking out to the media, which...
What was that like as a Chicago police officer on the inside doing that? Because were you ostracized, or was there a fallout from that? Because here you are, a police officer, and you're like protesting, like, open this case, press charges.
I'm going against the people who I consider my family, my second family. With law enforcement, it's this brotherhood. And for me to go and speak out in front of, the medical examiner's office or the courthouse or the police department, and speak with the media and share with them that my department wasn't doing their job, was incredibly difficult, because I love the police and I love being the police. And I have nothing but great pride for what I've witnessed on a daily basis, law enforcement officers doing to save lives and protect our community. But it just wasn't being done. And sadly, to this day, I will still read how cases are not investigated. So I think it was just a matter of, and it's still a matter of, creating this shift within our judicial system away from accidental to criminal.
Terry went on to form the Drug-Induced Homicide Foundation, an organization dedicated to supporting families like hers and driving change. You can learn more by listening to the full podcast. We've included a link in our show notes. If you're a mother grieving the loss of a child, dear friends of mine, moms who've lost children to fentanyl poisoning and overdose, are hosting the Sisters of Strength Warrior Moms Retreat, October 9th through the 11th at Wildwood Hills Ranch in St. Charles, Iowa. It's a weekend of healing, connection, horseback riding, and creative remembrance with women who understand. This weekend isn't about forgetting, it's about remembering with love. The link and details are in the show notes. I hope you'll join us. I'm just wondering how you coped during those first few weeks and months.
It didn't. I mean, I was just given this amazing blessing, 15 years earlier that I promised I was going to keep safe his whole life. I knew that I would never rest another day in my life and that life would never be the same. Um, I sat a lot. I was quiet. I watched flowers come through my door. I mean, my whole house, there wasn't even a spot to put them after a certain point. I didn't care about any of that. I just wanted my son back. And I remember sitting there on the couch going, this is the worst ever. Like, I can't believe this just happened to me. Like, this is what happens to other people. It doesn't happen to me. I had that life that nothing was going to happen. And I thought that. And it did. And I just remember thinking, I can't let another parent go through this. And I didn't know at that time what was going to come of that. But I knew that it was going to be my mission to fight hard. I don't do anything small. But, it was hard. I don't remember a lot of it. I will say that. I love that people, were caring for me, coming in and out of the door, bringing dinners and stuff like that. But, the flowers die, the meals go away, and you're left kind of to sit alone. And it's hard. It's really hard. And I don't want anybody to ever have to know what that's like.
So hard. And what you said there resonated with me because I remember thinking, this is not how our lives are supposed to go. This is not how my story is supposed to play out or my daughter's story. I remember feeling that same way, like, how can this be reality? But it was, obviously. And then because I had a platform, I knew I owed it to people to try to save someone else's kid. Just like I think every parent on this mission that I've spoken to is speaking out or taking action because they don't want this to happen to someone else's family.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's just, there's nothing but emptiness after that. And so I think when you finally decide that you're strong enough to stand up, that's what gives you some sort of purpose in what happened in your child's life, making sure that they didn't die in vain. And that's where this fight comes from.
Was Weston your only child?
No, I have 4 children. He was the oldest of 4. And my other kids, so Weston was 15, just turned 15 a couple months earlier. He was 15 and his brother was 12, sister was 10, and his littlest brother was 6. So I had a very young family.
Yeah, so young. And so how have your other children, because my children were in high school. Emily was the oldest and she was 21, so a few years older than Weston. And my other kids were in high school and I've done podcast episodes with them and talked to other siblings. But I don't know that I've talked to anybody that had kids so young as you. How did your other children cope and how have they come to understand it?
I don't think they do, and I don't think they have. They have to move on. I think little kids have a brain that kind of shelters them from anything too tremendous and understanding. So they've been displaced. We moved to the East Coast to be near family. That was hard for them. Um, they've had to make new friends. They don't really understand why this happened. Probably made them question God. I was quick to put them back in a Christian school on the East Coast to make sure that they had that spiritual connection and knew that they can lean on God. Um, it's been hard for them. They don't understand, why us? And then Weston's dog is, that we got. It was all of my kids' dog, but Weston took care of her. A year later, after Weston died, she died. And I just remember my littlest going, why does this keep happening to us? And it's just been a little unfair for them. So, when you lose a child, you don't just lose that child, your whole family dies in a sense. And it's just a very difficult way to live afterwards.
I always say it's like a bomb going off in the middle of a family. It really is. It sort of decimates the whole family in different ways. And then you worry about your other kids. When you know that you can lose a child, it's terrifying, I think.
Yeah, it truly is. Every time I walk out the door, you're a little more nervous of, and other people don't understand as much, like, where are they going to be? Do you know, who they're going to be with? You start worrying about stuff like that and really over asking, I feel like maybe, and you just, you're sensitive to it because of what you've been through. And, um, other people don't always understand that, but I think if they know, and I don't always tell people like, hi, my name's Ann and I lost a child. Like a lot of people don't
Right.
know what we've been through. So, you
Right.
know, it's hard. Everything about this is hard. There's nothing easy, but you try to find hope and, keeping your faith number one. That's the first for me is just, and trust me, I've had a lot of conversations with God that I would wonder if he's going to forgive me for. Um, but you just try to keep the faith and keep fighting and, you know, use it as lessons in this life and do everything you can to just learn from it and pick up the pieces and try to move forward as best you
And
can.
talking to your other kids, like you said, you talked to Weston about drugs. I talked to Emily about drugs. It didn't protect her from this and this scourge that we have of this poison being in the illicit drug supply. And even if you talk to your other kids, it's not necessarily, and I know. I mean, so far my other kids have been fine and they're starting, they're becoming young adults, which you're never fully in the clear, right? But makes me feel like, well, maybe we've made it through that tough time of experimentation and all those things without this happening again. But how do you talk to your other kids about drugs now?
Well, I witnessed it. I think that they know the severity of drugs and the repercussions because they watched what happened in real time. I think that's a really powerful lesson. Not that there's a personality for this, but my second child, who's now my oldest, who was the middle child, doesn't have the same personality that Weston. He doesn't mind. Social life isn't like very important to him. He loves his couple of friends that he has, and they're very close. And they do
Yeah.
stuff together. He has different interests. He's my piano player, my scientist, my math kid. And then my daughter is just very sweet. She's quiet. Um, she's just a really sweet, good girl. And, they both learned a very powerful lesson. I think she's probably the most affected by this because she was very close to her brother. And so the lesson that she had to watch and learn, she knows. I'm not saying that you could ever take your eye off the ball on this, but my kids did learn this at a young age. And you've mentioned that, I did have a young family. So it might be different where habits haven't been formed and they know the consequences. My youngest is Weston 2.0. He's very curious. He wants to learn everything in this world on his own. So I'm going to have to keep an eye on him. But he knows too. He doesn't want to die, and he knows his brother died. So
Right. And I do believe there are personality traits that just lend someone to be more of a risk taker,
yes,
more susceptible to these things than other kids. There's obviously personality traits, genetic factors, environment, all of it comes into play.
I
So
believe that.
yeah. And so, we talked about the days following Weston's death. At what point did you decide that you needed to become an advocate?
Um, so I would say about 6 months, and I had already joined all the groups I could on Facebook. Just someone give me some answers. Someone stand beside me. Someone walk this with me because I can't do this. I didn't think I was going to make it, but I had children to live for. And honestly, if I didn't have children to live for, I don't know where I'd be today. There was a group, Last Voices of Fentanyl. I called up the founder, April Babcock. I called her up and I said, I had already posted a video of Weston, and, you know, she had known who I was. She had reviewed some of the things I was posting. You know, she kind of stood behind the things that I was writing. And so when I called her, I said, hey, you know, I know you guys are having a march. I can't get to DC, but I know nobody's going to be there to moderate. I've been a moderator in the past. I was in media, and I had a page that I moderated at Flip It Red, California. I'd be happy to help moderate while you guys are away. And she called me up and she's like, I knew you were going to be, you know, I knew you were going to be the fighter. I knew you were going to be in this. And she, you know, immediately embraced the opportunity to have me a part of her moderators. So I moderated with Last Voices of Fentanyl for 3 years, giving, you know, my heart to this fight every day through the angel community with Last Voices of Fentanyl. And, you know, recently I'm not tied to any groups at this point. I've kind of started to shift my focus onto peer pressure, less fentanyl, more let's have that conversation. Because, well, fentanyl is the thing that got to my child and took his life. It was, the avenue was truly peer pressure.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I was going to mention April Babcock has been on this podcast before,
Oh, really?
along with many members of Lost Voices of Fentanyl. I actually went out to one of their rallies and interviewed many parents who were out there for the podcast. We did a whole series. So I'm very familiar with them, and our audience is as well. I do think you've said something there that I believe wholeheartedly, the peer pressure part. For my daughter, it was a boyfriend. That was where the pressure came from. That was where the starting to smoke marijuana came from, the boyfriend. And so whether it's just a friend or a boyfriend or a girlfriend, learning to listen to what you want and to stand up to that and to really realize, you know, that's a hard thing to teach a kid. And we, in our curriculum, Emily's Hope has K through 12 substance use prevention curriculum. We do address pressures, peer pressures, along with emotions as part of that. And so as for peer pressure, and also just with all the things on social media, peer pressure, right? I mean, kids are pressured to do all kinds of things, not just take a drug. So what have you learned about peer pressure, and what do you want to see happen?
I just think kids aren't prepared for high pressure sales. I think that's what it comes down to. I don't know if you've ever, you know, walked into a mall and there's these kiosks in the center, and there's these people that have skincare, and they start trying to hand you a sample, and they say, here's a free sample. And this is what drug dealers do. And that's why I'm equating it to this. And so you know, first time walking through the mall, you're like, oh, you know, okay, thank you. And you take it, and then they follow you and they say, hey, by the way, I noticed your skin this. And they're grabbing your hand, and now they're rubbing something onto your hand, and we have this. And next thing you know, they're like, this is only $28, and look what it did to your hand. Do you see all this that I, you know, exfoliated? And they really sell you on it, and you just kind of feel like, oh my gosh, I have to buy this. And so, you know, those high pressure sales situations, they do the same thing to children. You know, here, just try this, just try this, just try this, just try it. Everybody's doing it. You know, you always hear that, but just try this. And they're watching people do it. They're watching people have fun doing things. You know, it's a crowd that's doing stuff. So these are the things that they do. And then they just, they take their hand, they give them one. They just take a little bit. You know, it's not going to, just try a little. And the kids don't understand these people are so well trained. This is a business. And you mentioned in the beginning, you said, you know, something about, you know, this is not going away. And the reason is because it's not only a multi-billion-dollar business, it's a multi-trillion-dollar enterprise. And these are businessmen. They have sales training. They have operations. They have factories. These people go to work every day. There's briefcases involved. There's 150,000 people that work in China to make these precursors. There are people in the cartels. They are business people, and multi-trillion-dollar industries don't die overnight. They're well trained. They train from the top down, and these are salespeople approaching your kids. If we don't teach them how to get through those high pressure situations, then your kids are susceptible, even from a 17-year-old kid who's been very well trained, who's charismatic, who's the life of the party, and your kid wants to be popular. So
Yeah.
I tell parents to run scenarios, role play, talk to your kids. What are you going to do when so-and-so says this? Drug test your kids. That's an easy way. We were just talking about this on this panel 2 days ago. That's an easy way to be like, I can't. My mom drug tests me at random, and if this shows
Right.
up, I'm
You give your
dead.
kid an excuse, a reason to say no. If you
Yeah.
can articulate that to your kid in a way where you're not being like, it's not that I don't trust you. I want to give you a reason to say no. So I'm going to sporadically drug test you. And then you can just say, no, I get drug tested by my parents. And yeah, that is a good tool. And I think you're right. When I talk to students, and I've talked to them all across the country, I talk to them about how this is about greed, and they are the targets. They are the next customers for these cartels, and cartels are a serious business. They have accountants, lawyers, all
They
the things you
do.
talked about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're businesses, and if we don't give our kids to the ability to learn from these high pressure sales, like as adults, like I was mentioning, if we have a hard time as adults saying no to
Right.
these high pressure sales situations, how do we expect our young kids who have never been in these situations before to say no? And to be able to say no thanks. But once you do say no, that I know when I go to the mall now, I'm like, no thanks, and I walk right by, because I know I've learned to say no. And that's it. You just walk and you say no. And it gives other kids in the room the ability to be like, they didn't do it, now I can say no too. And you're going to be a leader in that, and that's great. And you're going to be alive tomorrow. So I think this is the biggest lesson that kids need to know. Talk to your kids and run scenarios. Please run scenarios. Give them the script and practice it so that when it comes out of their mouth, it's natural. They know they have to say no. They know how to say no, and give them the ability to do it, and the courage and conviction to say no.
The other thing that we really try to do at Emily's Hope, because kids won't always listen to adults, to their teachers or their parents, right? But they will often listen to other kids. So
Yes.
we try to create peer leaders with our youth empowerment clubs
Beautiful.
that are
Yes.
spreading the message to other kids. And if more kids are telling other kids about, I just saw a study in JAMA recently that many kids don't even realize the danger of fentanyl. And you think with advocates like us, like we're talking about this all the time, we're going into schools, but not enough kids are getting the education, and they really need to hear it from their peers too.
Yeah, they do. And I think peer-to-peer education is huge. We had it when I was growing up. It's probably during Nancy Reagan's Just Say No thing. It
Which didn't
was,
work. I wish it worked.
you
Yeah.
know what? Just Say No was a good idea. But it was a bubble. It was just say no. But if you pop that bubble, there's nothing inside. This is why I
Right.
tell you have to have these layers of protection. Talking to your kids is great. They're telling them to say no. Give them the tools. But peer-to-peer is so important in this whole entire onion.
Are you ready to protect the next generation from the dangers of substance use? Emily's Hope has created a comprehensive K through 12 substance use prevention curriculum designed to educate, empower, and equip students with the tools they need to make healthy choices. Our age-appropriate lessons start in kindergarten and build through high school, using science, real stories, and interactive learning to help kids understand their bodies, brains, and risk of drug use. We're already reaching thousands of students across multiple states, and we're just getting started. Visit emilyshopeedu.org to learn more and share our curriculum with your school administrators and counselors. At Emily's Hope, we believe prevention begins with education. Let's work together to keep our kids safe. At Emily's Hope, we believe peer-to-peer conversations about the dangers of illicit substances are important. That's why we include this information in our K-12 substance use prevention curriculum and offer youth empowerment clubs and teams designed to give students a voice in promoting wellness, leadership, and prevention. Want to learn more about our programs? Head over to our website, emilyshope.charity. You can find a link in the show notes. And where else would you like to take your advocacy work?
I mean, I'm taking it everywhere. There's no limits to where I'll take it if it's going to save lives. I do want. No, I will say this. I do want to get more focused on the faith-based. Um, to kind of go more into the faith-based, arenas. I haven't really um, done specific faith-based arenas at this point, but I think a lot of churches are vulnerable because they think, well, our kids are Christian, they're not going to do it. So
Right. Right. Yeah, I did have this false sense because I took my daughter to church. She was active in church. She went to a private school. I think I had this false sense of security that this kind of thing wouldn't happen to her, that would somehow protect her. But that's not the case.
no, I mean, I think churches think that, and I think Christian schools think that. When we talk to people who try to get into schools a lot, they really have a hard time with, you know, bringing their message into
Yes,
Christian schools.
that's
It's
true.
tough
Even with
school.
our curriculum,
Yeah.
we've had a really hard time getting into the Christian and the Catholic schools. Even in my own community, we're all across the nation, but those are can be. We're in one small Christian school, which I'm so appreciate, but the larger ones, we've had a lot of trouble getting our curriculum in there. It's almost like, well, we don't want parents to think this can happen here, so we don't want to teach or talk about it.
Yeah. I mean, and I don't understand it. I mean, this could happen to anyone in any faith, and it's not really about your faith.
No.
You hope that, you've done a good job on teaching them, but sometimes peer influence is stronger, and God will forgive me tomorrow. I'll ask for forgiveness instead of, permission type of attitudes. These kids also in their teen years, and I'll mention this, and Christian schools know this, begin questioning their faith. And so you have this, perfect storm of, where is God, who's God, and where am I going? And, everybody else is having fun and doesn't seem so fun to not have fun. So, you never know. Christian schools are just as vulnerable as any other type.
Certainly. And I grew up going to a Catholic school, and we had a lot of kids back then before fentanyl was on the scene, a long time ago, but who were in rehab, right? So it wasn't like there was any sort of magical inoculation from these kinds of problems just because you're in a Christian school.
So there's
Yeah.
there's no magic at all. It's unfortunate that, we can't break through because, you're supposed to just hope that you've done a good job teaching them that their faith, this would be something. And I don't even know what they teach them, to be honest with you. I think they just leave, I think they leave that to the parents, but it's important to talk to your kids. This is just a different, it's not your, here's what you hear all the time. It's not your parents' Woodstock weed. And I think that's where probably people in education systems, it's not happening in their high-end communities and their private schools because people have money. And I can tell you that we lived in a guard-gated golf course community, like we had it all, and we went to private schools and happened to us. So it can, but I think that there's, a stigma. There's always that stigma. But we're dealing with a different generation of drugs. Fentanyl wasn't around back in our day. You could probably experiment and live to tell about it, typically. Not these days. He was during the time that my son died during the deadliest time. It was in 2022. And, 7 out of 10 pills are deadly. Thank God under this president, we have about 3 out of 10 pills are deadly. And I think that's partially due to the cartels saying, why are we killing our clients? People kept asking that question. And it was always my answer was because they really don't care. They have more clients coming through the door.
Right. And yeah, I had the DEA tell me, I've asked that question too. And I had the DEA say, well, the line is out the door. The demand is so strong. There's more
Yeah.
people where that came from. So they really don't care. But at some point, what we're trying to do on so many fronts is decrease the demand, right? So if there's no
Mhm.
demand, um, hopefully there's less fentanyl.
Yeah.
And it's the next thing though. It's the next analog. It's the nitazines. It's the other
That's
things
it.
that, yeah.
Fentanyl is a thing here now, but behind it are all the nitazines, isonitazines, all the tranquilizers and, the rhino tranquilizers, elephant tranquilizers.
Want to stay up to date on the latest developments in the evolving opioid epidemic? Our reporters track the latest details each day for our news headline services. Again, just head over to our website, emily'shope.charity.
And I don't think most people know this. Once you try fentanyl once, you're hooked. It's 50 times more addictive than crack, 100 times more stronger than morphine. This is like much worse than heroin. Most people don't even realize that. And they're putting it in things that your kids do: vapes, marijuana. People have this idea that if you smoke it, marijuana, it's not going to hurt you because it'll have burned off. No, people intentionally smoke fentanyl. So that whole thing is just out the window. It's in vapes, marijuana, it's in cocaine. Then of course it's in, for people who are drug addicts, it is in heroin, and they don't deserve to be deceived to death either. They don't deserve to be poisoned. And when you see these people on the streets these days, bent over like Gumby and in a trance, they don't want to be that way. And it's not the same drug addicts as before. And I hate the stigma that goes around it. These people don't want to be there. They are trapped. They cannot stop. It is the most horrible withdrawal symptoms that, yes, they can kill you. And after one time of trying, and that medetomidine is what it's called. Medetomidine, that will kill you the first time trying. Withdrawal symptoms. And yes, there is another one that you were talking about as well. And it's just the generation of drugs coming up are just outside of any realm of understanding.
Terrifying, terrifying. And so we have to start, as we do with like 5-year-olds in kindergarten, start talking to kids right away and educate everybody on this issue and protect everybody from it. And nobody deserves to be suffering from substance use disorder. And everybody deserves a chance to get well and to heal from that. And I think it's so much about talking about it, educating, ending the stigma, getting people help and treatment, and of course, stopping it on the international level from ever entering our borders in the first place. And that's challenging with the mail and with ships, and there are many ways to get it here. So.
And an ounce of compassion, like put down your phone and go help the person bent over, see if they need, see if they're alive,
This world could use more compassion everywhere. I agree with you 100%. And I just want to thank you so much for being on the podcast. Are there any words that you'd like to leave us with today?
Talk to your kids about everything. Talk to your kids about drugs. Role play, give them the script, and really talk to them about peer pressure and why it's so important to be able to have that courage and strength to say no.
Thank you so much, Anne. I really appreciate our conversation.
I did as well. Thank you so much for having me on.
And thank you again for listening to this episode of Grieving Out Loud. I hope you found it helpful. Join us every week for a new conversation. You can check out hundreds of previous episodes anytime on our website, emily'shope.charity. We'd also appreciate it if you just take a moment to rate and review this podcast and share it with friends and family. Together, we can raise awareness and hopefully save and transform lives. Thanks again for listening. Until next time, wishing you faith, hope, and courage. This podcast is produced by Casey Wanenberg King and Kaylee Fitz.